Armin had always thought his life was ordinary. He lived alone in a small house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood. Most days were simple and uneventful. He worked from home and spent his evenings reading books, watching old movies, or occasionally cooking new recipes. Life had a routine that he liked, and he rarely imagined anything unusual could happen to him. But one evening, everything changed in the most unimaginable way. It started like any other night. The sky was dark, and the stars twinkled faintly. Armin was sitting in his living room, a warm lamp casting a soft glow over the furniture. He was deeply absorbed in a science fiction novel, imagining himself in faraway galaxies, dreaming about distant worlds, and thinking about what life could be beyond Earth. The clock ticked steadily, and the only sound was the soft turning of his book's pages. Then suddenly he noticed something strange in the corner of the room. At first he thought it was a trick of the light or a reflection from his lamp, but the air shimmered in a way he had never seen before. Curiosity replaced his initial confusion, and he stared at it, unable to move. Then, with a soft hum that made the hairs on his arms stand up, the shimmering air stretched and expanded. A round shape began to form, glowing with soft colors that shifted between green, blue, and gold. The colors were mesmerizing, almost beautiful, but they carried an energy that made Armin's heart race. He couldn't understand what was happening. His mind raced with questions. Was it a natural phenomenon, some kind of strange light show, or was he imagining things? Before he could think more, the round shape opened like a door. Armin's eyes widened in shock as a figure stepped through. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin seemed to glow faintly, like moonlight reflecting on water, and her eyes were bright and luminous, filled with intelligence and emotion he could not describe. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, moving softly, even though there was no wind. She looked around his room with curiosity and a hint of urgency, as if she had traveled a very long way to reach this place. Armin's heart pounded. He wanted to run, but his feet felt stuck to the floor. The alien woman took a careful step toward him. She did not speak, but her eyes seemed to search his face for understanding. Armin realized she was trying to communicate, but not in words he could understand. Her movements were graceful, almost like a dance, and she held her hands in front of her as if to show she meant no harm. Fear and fascination battled inside him. He could not tell if she was dangerous, but there was something gentle about her. For several moments, neither of them moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the portal behind her. Armin's mind raced with thoughts. How did she find his house? Why did she come here? Was it real, or was he dreaming? Every story he had ever read about alien encounters had taught him one thing. Fear and caution were the first reactions. But something about her made him want to understand rather than run away. Gathering his courage, Armin stepped closer. "Hello?" he said softly, his voice shaking slightly. The alien woman tilted her head, examining him. Then she raised a hand, slowly, and pointed at him, and finally at herself. Armin realized she was trying to introduce herself, or at least make some connection. He nodded slowly, smiling nervously, and mimicked the gesture, pointing at himself. She seemed to understand. Her eyes lit up faintly, and she made a small sound almost like a musical note. Armin realized that communication was going to be different. Words might not work, but understanding could happen in other ways. He took another cautious step forward and tried simple gestures, holding out his hand, showing objects in the room, drawing shapes in the air. The alien woman watched carefully and sometimes mirrored his gestures. It was slow, but they began to form a small bridge between their worlds. Armin noticed something else. Her clothes were not like anything he had seen before. They seemed to shimmer with light and texture, and there was a small device attached to her wrist that projected faint holographic images. He didn't dare touch it, but he could see that it displayed shapes and symbols that changed when she moved her hand. It was clear she had technology far beyond his understanding, yet she did not seem threatening. She seemed more confused than dangerous, like a traveler lost in an unfamiliar land. As minutes passed, Armin realized that she might be frightened too. He tried to make his voice calm and gentle, speaking softly as he moved slowly. She watched his every move carefully, as if learning how humans behaved. Armin remembered reading about how trust often started with small gestures. He sat down on the couch, patting the space next to him, hoping she would understand that she was safe. Slowly, she stepped closer, her movements careful and delicate. She hesitated for a moment, then sat down opposite him, keeping a respectful distance. The room was quiet again, but the tension had eased slightly. Armin could feel her curiosity growing, and in return, his fear began to change into wonder. He had never imagined that such an encounter could happen in his ordinary living room. He watched her study the objects around him, the books on the shelf, the lamp on the table, the small plant by the window. Her eyes reflected amazement, like she was seeing things for the first time, and Armin smiled softly. Perhaps she was not only an alien visitor but also a traveler who was discovering a new world just as much as he was discovering her. Hours passed, though time seemed to stretch strangely in her presence. Armin offered her water, pointing at the glass and mimicking drinking. She touched the glass lightly, then smiled faintly, and the corner of her mouth lifted in a gesture of understanding. They could not speak each other's language, yet a bond began to form. Both of them were learning, observing, and slowly understanding that this encounter, strange as it was, could lead to something extraordinary. By the time the night grew deeper, and shadows stretched long across the room, Armin knew one thing. His life had changed forever. The portal still shimmered faintly behind her, but for the first time, he felt not fear but anticipation. He did not know why she had come, what her mission was, or how long she would stay. But one thing was certain. His ordinary life had ended the moment she stepped through that glowing doorway. He leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully as she looked around, touching objects lightly and tilting her head in fascination. He realized that the adventure was only beginning. The stranger from another world had arrived in his house, and it was up to him to discover why. The next morning, Armin woke up with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The alien woman was still in his living room, sitting quietly and observing everything around her. Overnight, he had thought a lot about what had happened. Was she here by accident, or had she chosen his home for a reason? Either way, he knew he could not ignore her presence. He decided to try to understand her better. He started by offering her food. He went to the kitchen and brought a small plate with bread, cheese, and some fruit. He pointed at the food and made gestures to show that it was safe to eat. The alien woman tilted her head, examining the items carefully. Then slowly she reached out and touched the bread. She sniffed it and took a small bite, watching Armin closely. When she realized it was harmless, she smiled faintly. Armin felt a sense of relief. Small steps, he thought. Every tiny action helped build trust. Communication was the next challenge. Words did not work. She could not understand him, and he could not understand her. But Armin was determined to find a way. He began to draw symbols on a piece of paper, circles, lines, and shapes that represented objects and actions. The alien woman watched closely and then drew similar shapes with her fingers in the air. It was slow at first, and sometimes they made mistakes, misunderstanding each other completely. But gradually, they started to share simple ideas. She could indicate hunger, thirst, curiosity, or caution, and he could respond in kind. Armin also noticed her technology. The small device on her wrist could project images and shapes that moved in the air. He watched in fascination as she touched the device, and a holographic map appeared, showing strange landscapes, symbols, and lights. It was clear that she had traveled a very long way to reach him. He tried to ask questions by pointing at the map, but she only smiled faintly and shook her head. Whatever her mission was, it was not something she could explain easily. Days passed, and their routine developed. Armin helped her understand basic human activities. He showed her how to drink from a glass, how to use a chair, and even how to operate simple appliances. She was a fast learner, picking up everything almost immediately. He also learned from her. He discovered that she could manipulate small energies, like moving objects slightly or creating tiny lights with her hands. Sometimes, she would hover her hand over a plant, and it would sway as if in a gentle wind. Armin realized that her abilities were remarkable, and yet she used them carefully, never showing off. Despite the differences between their worlds, they began to form a connection. Armin started to feel that she was not just a visitor, but a being with thoughts and feelings. She had curiosity, wonder, and perhaps even loneliness. He understood that she was searching for something, though what it was, he did not know. He tried showing her pictures of people, cities, and nature on his tablet. She watched with fascination, pointing at images, tilting her head, and sometimes making small musical sounds, as if expressing delight or surprise. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned pink and orange, Armand realized something important. This alien woman was not dangerous. She had no intention to harm him or anyone else. Her presence in his house was purposeful, but peaceful. He remembered the stories he had read about fear and suspicion, but now he understood that first impressions could be wrong. He felt a sense of responsibility. She had come to him for a reason, and he wanted to help her. Armand also noticed small changes in his house. Sometimes objects moved slightly when she was near, or lights flickered when she gestured toward them. It was subtle, almost magical, and it reminded him that he was no longer in an ordinary situation. One night he woke to see her standing in front of the portal, studying it carefully. She reached out and touched the shimmering air, and faint symbols appeared on the floor, glowing softly. It was as if she was trying to understand how the portal worked and how she had traveled here. Armin watched quietly, feeling awe and curiosity at the same time. They began to share experiences beyond language. Armin would show her how to make tea, and she would respond by creating small light patterns in the air, as if celebrating the small achievement. Sometimes they would sit quietly, observing the sunset or listening to the wind. Armin realized that communication was not only about words, it was about attention, observation, and shared moments. He learned that she could sense emotions through gestures and facial expressions, and he could sense her feelings in return. As the days went on, the mystery of her visit grew stronger. She never spoke, yet Armin could feel her intentions through actions. She pointed at certain objects, showing interest or confusion. She made small symbols on paper or in the air, and Armin tried to respond with simple drawings. Slowly, a system developed. She could ask questions about food, objects, or even the outside world, and he would answer in gestures, drawings, or simple demonstrations. It was not perfect, but it was enough for understanding. One afternoon, Armin decided to explore her curiosity further. He showed her books with pictures of the earth, mountains, rivers, forests, and cities. She touched the pages carefully, tracing the images with her fingers. When she looked up at him, her eyes seemed to ask a silent question. "Is this all your world has?" He nodded and smiled. She tilted her head, as if thinking deeply, then touched her device and projected a small image of a distant planet. Armin could only stare in amazement. He realized that her world was very different from his, and she must have traveled across unimaginable distances to reach him. Even though their understanding was slow and sometimes frustrating, Armin began to feel a deep connection with her. He understood that she was not only visiting, but also learning, exploring, and perhaps even seeking friendship. He felt a responsibility to make her feel safe, to help her navigate a world she did not know. In turn, he learned patience, observation, and the wonder of encountering someone completely different from himself. By the end of the week, they had established a simple routine. She would explore his home carefully, study objects, and use her device to project images. Armand would guide her gently, teaching her human ways and trying to answer her silent questions. They still could not speak in words, but their bond was growing. The alien woman had come with a purpose, though he did not yet understand what it was, and Armand had realized that his ordinary life had become extraordinary, filled with wonder, curiosity, and a connection that crossed worlds. As night fell, Armand sat across from her, watching her study a small lamp. He felt a mix of fear, excitement, and anticipation. The questions remained. Why had she come? What was her mission? Could he help her? But one thing was certain. He was ready to learn, ready to explore, and ready to face whatever this mysterious encounter would bring. The alien woman looked at him, and for a moment, they shared a silent understanding. Words were not needed. Their journey had begun, and together they would discover answers beyond anything either of them had imagined. As the days turned into weeks, Armand and the alien woman grew more comfortable with each other's presence. By now, the initial fear had faded, replaced by curiosity and a sense of trust. Each day brought new discoveries. Armand learned that she was incredibly intelligent and could understand complex ideas very quickly, even without words. He began to notice subtle details about her world, revealed in small gestures, symbols, and the images projected by her device. One morning, Armand found her standing in front of the window, gazing outside. She seemed fascinated by the ordinary life around the neighborhood, the birds flying, children playing, and the gentle sway of trees in the wind. Her eyes followed the movement of everything as if she were trying to understand how life worked on Earth. Armand realized that everything humans took for granted was completely new to her. He decided to explain things through actions. He pointed at a bird, flapped his arms slightly, and made soft, chirping sounds. She tilted her head, then imitated his gestures in her own elegant way, and for a moment they both laughed silently at the awkward imitation. Despite the growing connection, the mystery of her visit became harder to ignore. She often sat quietly, touching her device and projecting images that seemed to show distant landscapes, unusual structures, and glowing patterns that Armand could not comprehend. Sometimes she would touch his hand gently and focus her gaze on him, as if asking a question he could not answer. Armand began to understand that she was searching for something, or perhaps someone. But he had no idea what it was. Strange things began to happen in the house. Small objects would move slightly when she was near, like a cup sliding across the table or a pen rolling off the desk. Lights flickered softly when she gestured toward them, and sometimes a soft, colorful glow filled the room for no reason at all. Armand was amazed, but never afraid. He realized that her abilities, while unusual, were not meant to harm. They were simply a part of her nature, tools she could use to explore and interact with the world around her. One day, Armand decided to show her more of human culture. He brought out a music player and played gentle melodies. She listened carefully, her eyes wide with wonder. Occasionally, she touched her device, and faint light patterns danced in the air, synchronized with the rhythm of the music. Armand could feel that she was responding emotionally, even if he could not fully understand her thoughts. He smiled, realizing that despite the differences between their worlds, music was a bridge they could share. As their bond grew, Armand began to notice subtle hints about her mission. She often projected images of her home world, showing landscapes that glowed under multiple suns, cities that floated above the ground, and beings that looked similar to her. Sometimes she would point to herself and then to the images, as if explaining her origin. Armin watched these images carefully, trying to understand the urgency in her gestures. It became clear that she had come with a purpose, though the details remained hidden. One evening, while Armin was preparing tea, the alien woman suddenly projected a large, bright image of her planet. The images shifted rapidly, showing a landscape that seemed to be breaking apart, with strange lights and energy patterns disrupting the surface. She gestured frantically at the image, pointing to specific areas and then looking at Armin with an expression that combined hope and concern. Armin felt a shiver run down his spine. He realized that her visit was not just about curiosity. Her world was in trouble and she needed help. Armin tried to calm her by pointing at the tea, gesturing for her to sit and speaking softly. She paused, taking a deep breath, and then projected smaller images, showing delicate structures that seemed to be crumbling, glowing threads that connected important points, and beings working frantically to maintain balance. Armin studied every detail, slowly beginning to understand that the crisis was both large and complex. It was not something he could fix easily, yet he felt a strong desire to help her. During the next few days, Armin began experimenting with ways to communicate more efficiently. He used a notebook to draw ideas, symbols, and plans. The alien woman would respond by projecting images from her device, showing corrections, suggestions, or entirely new concepts. Together, they developed a slow but effective method of collaboration. Armin marveled at her intelligence and adaptability. Every day, he discovered something new about her abilities. She could manipulate small fields of energy, influence the flow of light, and even alter the movement of objects subtly. Yet she used these powers responsibly, never forcing them beyond necessity. As they worked, Armin also noticed that her presence affected him in unexpected ways. He began having vivid dreams at night, often filled with strange landscapes, glowing lights, and mysterious symbols. Sometimes these dreams seemed to convey messages from her world or clues about her mission. He woke up feeling inspired, as if his subconscious mind had absorbed knowledge he did not consciously understand. He shared these dreams with her using drawings and gestures, and she would respond with subtle nods or faint musical tones, indicating recognition. Despite the gravity of her situation, there were lighter moments as well. Armin taught her how to make simple meals, how to brew tea, and even how to enjoy the small pleasures of life, like watching the sunset or feeling the rain on her hands. She responded with fascination, occasionally creating tiny light patterns in the air to mimic the sun or rain. These small moments of joy reminded Armin that even amidst crises, life had beauty and wonder, and shared experiences could build trust and friendship. By the end of the third week, Armin realized that their bond had grown beyond simple communication. He felt a connection that transcended language, culture, and even worlds. He understood her emotions through gestures, expressions, and the subtle light patterns she created. She, in turn, seemed to sense his thoughts, often responding to unspoken questions or worries. Together, they were beginning to form a partnership built on understanding, trust, and shared purpose. But the mystery of why she had come remained. Every day, Armin asked questions through gestures, drawings, and symbols. She would respond with images or musical tones, but the answers were always partial, leaving him wanting more. He knew her world was in danger, but he could not fully comprehend the scope of the problem. Yet, despite uncertainty, he felt a growing determination to help her in any way he could. One quiet night, Armin sat next to her as she projected faint, glowing symbols from her device. He watched carefully, trying to learn as much as he could. She touched his hand gently, and for a brief moment, it felt as if their minds were connected. He glimpsed flashes of her world, bright landscapes, fragile structures, and the urgency of her mission. He realized that her arrival at his house was no accident. She had chosen him for a reason, perhaps because of something in his past or a quality he possessed that made him uniquely suited to help. Armin leaned back, staring at the shimmering portal behind her. He no longer feared it. The unknown had become part of his life, and he was ready to face it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew that together they could confront them. The alien woman had come to Earth with a purpose, and he had begun to understand that purpose through trust, patience, and shared discovery. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Armin felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Days had passed since Armin and the alien woman had begun to understand each other. Their bond had grown stronger, and trust was no longer a question. It was a certainty. But the mystery of her visit still lingered in Armin's mind. He knew she had a purpose, yet he could not understand what it was. Every time he tried to ask through gestures or symbols, she would respond with vague images or musical tones, leaving him more curious and anxious. He felt that the answers were close, but not yet ready to be revealed. One morning, Armin noticed that she seemed more focused than usual. She stood in front of the portal, projecting images from her device, and carefully rearranging symbols and lines in the air. There was urgency in her movements, but also a sense of calm determination. Armin realized that she had been preparing him for something important. She turned to him and touched his hand gently. In that moment, he felt a wave of trust, as if she were silently telling him that she was ready to share her secret. Using a combination of gestures, drawings, and her holographic projections, she began to reveal the truth. Armin watched in awe as images of her world appeared. A planet of breathtaking beauty, with floating cities, glowing rivers, and landscapes bathed in soft, multicolored light. But the beauty was overshadowed by scenes of destruction. Cracks in the ground that glowed ominously, structures crumbling, and a strange energy swirling chaotically. She pointed to specific areas, showing the points of greatest danger, and then gestured toward herself, as if explaining that she had come to seek help. Armin realized that her world was facing a serious crisis, one that threatened the survival of her people. The alien woman projected images of her civilization struggling to maintain balance, showing beings similar to her trying to stabilize the planet's energy. The scenes were both beautiful and terrifying. He could see the urgency in her eyes, the unspoken question. Could he help her? Could someone from Earth, a world so different and far away, make a difference? She then projected a series of images, showing him specific acts from his past, small moments where he had shown kindness, courage, or creativity. A time he helped a lost child, a moment when he had solved a difficult problem, a gesture of friendship he had extended without expecting anything in return. The alien woman pointed to these images repeatedly, as if to explain why she had chosen him. Armin stared in disbelief. She had traveled across galaxies because of qualities she had observed in him, actions he had long forgotten, but which had left a lasting impression. The realization struck him deeply. His ordinary life, filled with small acts of goodness and thoughtfulness, had given him a purpose he could never have imagined. He had never considered himself special, but the alien woman's journey proved otherwise. She had chosen him because she believed he could help solve the crisis threatening her world. Armin felt a mixture of pride, fear, and determination. He knew the responsibility was enormous, but he also understood that he could not turn away. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly to prepare for the journey ahead. She showed him how her technology worked, projecting detailed maps of her planet and explaining the energy patterns that needed to be restored. He tried to understand everything, asking questions through gestures and drawings. She responded patiently, guiding him step by step. Sometimes he struggled to comprehend the complexity of her world, but her calm presence reassured him. Together they formed a plan, combining his human problem-solving skills with her advanced knowledge and abilities. Arman also began to learn about the people of her planet. She showed images of her fellow beings, their cities, and their culture. Despite their advanced technology, they faced the same emotions and challenges that humans did: fear, hope, curiosity, and compassion. He realized that the bond he had formed with the alien woman was a bridge to an entire civilization, and that helping her was not just about solving a problem, it was about connecting two worlds. There were moments of doubt and fear. Arman sometimes wondered if he was capable of making a difference. The scale of the crisis seemed overwhelming, and the thought of leaving Earth behind was both exciting and terrifying. Yet, the alien woman's trust in him never wavered. She touched his hand gently, projected images of encouragement, and used soft musical tones to communicate reassurance. In those moments, he felt a strength he had never known within himself. Finally, the day came to step through the portal together. Arman prepared himself, gathering a few essentials and bracing for the unknown. The alien woman stood beside him, calm and resolute. She gestured for him to take her hand, and he felt a surge of trust and courage. The portal shimmered brightly, a doorway to a world beyond his imagination. With a deep breath, Arman stepped forward, leaving behind his familiar home, his neighborhood, and the life he had always known. As they crossed the threshold, the world around him changed instantly. Colors he had never seen before filled his vision, and the air felt alive with energy. The alien woman guided him carefully, showing him how to move through her world safely. They traveled through vast landscapes, floating cities and glowing forests. Arman could see the beauty and fragility of her planet, and he understood the urgency of their mission. Every step he took, every action he made could contribute to saving her civilization. During their journey, the alien woman continued to teach him about her world's energy systems, showing how the balance had been disrupted and how it could be restored. Arman applied his knowledge of science, observation, and problem-solving, combining it with her technology to develop solutions. Together, they worked as a team, learning from each other and adapting to challenges. The partnership was strong, built on trust, communication, and a shared goal. Even amidst the urgency of their mission, there were moments of wonder. Arman marveled at floating gardens, rivers of light, and creatures that moved gracefully through the air. He realized that despite the crisis, there was beauty, resilience, and hope. The alien woman smiled at him during these moments, her luminous eyes reflecting pride and gratitude. He felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced on Earth, a feeling that every step, every decision mattered. By the end of their first day in her world, Arman knew that the challenge ahead would be difficult, but he also knew he was ready. The alien woman had shown him why she came, and he had accepted the responsibility. Together, they would face the crisis, combining human creativity and compassion with advanced alien knowledge. The bond they had formed, built on trust, understanding, and shared experience, would guide them through the unknown. And as they rested beneath the glow of her world's twin suns, Arman realized that his life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. He was no longer just an ordinary man from a quiet neighborhood. He was a part of something much greater. A journey that connected worlds, bridged differences, and proved that even the smallest acts of kindness could have extraordinary consequences. As Arman stepped further into her world, the reality of the situation became clearer with every moment. The alien woman guided him carefully, showing him the places where the planet's energy had been disrupted. Rivers of light that should have flowed steadily were flickering and breaking apart. Bridges that connected cities hovered precariously, and glowing crystals that provided balance to the environment were unstable. Armin realized that helping her was not just about solving a problem. It was about saving countless lives, including hers. She led him to a city that floated above a glowing river. The buildings were delicate, with intricate designs that seemed impossible to construct with human hands. Yet, despite the beauty, the city had cracks and fractures. Some structures wavered as if they might collapse at any moment. Citizens moved, cautiously, aware of the instability. The alien woman gestured toward the floating structures, showing Armin what needed to be repaired. Using her device, she projected a network of energy lines that he could follow, marking points where intervention was necessary. Armin felt a mixture of fear and determination. He had never faced a challenge like this before, but the trust she had placed in him gave him courage. He remembered the lessons from Earth: observation, patience, and creativity. Slowly, he began analyzing the patterns and figuring out ways to stabilize them. With her guidance, he learned to use her technology to channel energy safely. At first, he made mistakes, causing small disruptions or delays, but she never scolded him. Instead, she projected encouraging images and used soft musical tones to show him how to adjust. Together, they worked tirelessly. Hours and days blurred as they moved from one location to another, restoring balance to the floating cities, stabilizing the energy rivers, and repairing the glowing crystals. Armin marveled at her abilities. With a simple gesture, she could manipulate energy, create protective shields, or illuminate entire areas to guide him. He realized that her skills were extraordinary. But what impressed him more was her patience and her willingness to teach him. Every step of the way, he learned not only about her world, but also about himself, his capacity for courage, problem-solving, and resilience. As they worked, Armin also observed the citizens of her world. They were similar to her, but had their own unique qualities. Some approached him cautiously, curious about the human who had come to help. Others watched from a distance, impressed by the teamwork between him and the alien woman. Slowly, Armin felt a connection with them as well. Even though he could not communicate in their language, his actions and determination spoke louder than words. He realized that help could transcend language, culture, and even species. During a particularly challenging day, they faced a massive energy disruption in the largest floating city. The river of light that flowed beneath the city was dangerously unstable, and the buildings above swayed perilously. Armin's heart raced, but he focused, remembering the careful instructions she had given him. Using her device, he channeled energy through the correct points, stabilizing the flow just enough to prevent collapse. The alien woman watched closely, her luminous eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and relief. When the city finally stabilized, she touched his hand gently, a silent gesture of gratitude and acknowledgement. Armin felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had contributed meaningfully to saving lives. Amid the intensity of their mission, there were moments of wonder and beauty. Armin often paused to admire the glowing landscapes, the floating gardens, and the shimmering skies. The alien woman shared these moments with him, creating patterns of light in the air that danced in harmony with the environment. These shared experiences reminded him that even in the face of danger and urgency, life had moments of joy and awe. They laughed together silently, marveling at the colors, shapes, and energy around them. As their work continued, the alien woman began to reveal more about her people's culture and values. She projected images of festivals, celebrations, and gatherings that showed unity, creativity, and care for one another. Armin saw that despite the advanced technology and extraordinary abilities, the essence of her civilization was not so different from humanity. They valued connection, compassion, and problem-solving just as humans did. Armin felt honored to be part of this world, even temporarily, and to contribute to something larger than himself. After days of continuous effort, the final challenge approached, a massive energy core that regulated the planet's stability. The core was nearly collapsing, and without intervention, the consequences would be catastrophic. Armin felt a wave of fear, but also determination. The alien woman stood beside him, calm and confident. She projected precise instructions, guiding his hands and showing him how to apply energy in the correct patterns. It required perfect timing, careful observation, and absolute focus. Armin followed every instruction, his heart racing as he manipulated the energy lines. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the energy core stabilized. The planet's glowing rivers became steady, the floating cities no longer swayed, and the citizens of her world watched in awe as balance returned. Armin felt a sense of relief and accomplishment unlike anything he had ever known. The alien woman touched his hand, and her eyes glowed brightly, expressing gratitude, pride, and something more, a deep, unspoken bond that had formed through trust, cooperation, and shared struggle. With the crisis resolved, the alien woman led Armin to a quiet place overlooking a serene landscape. Twin suns reflected off the flowing rivers and floating gardens. She projected a final series of images, showing the harmony restored to her world. Armin could see the citizens celebrating safely, the energy flowing smoothly, and the fragile structures standing firm. He realized that their teamwork had made a real difference. The sense of purpose he had felt throughout the journey now became a profound understanding of connection and responsibility. Before returning to Earth, the alien woman and Armin spent a quiet moment together. She projected images of his home, showing the familiar streets, his small house, and the peaceful life he had left behind. He understood that he would return, but he would never be the same. The journey had changed him. He had discovered courage, intelligence, empathy, and the ability to make a difference in worlds beyond his own. The alien woman's trust in him had unlocked potential he had never imagined. Finally, the moment to leave arrived. The alien woman guided him back to the portal that had brought him here. She touched his hand one last time, and Armin felt a wave of gratitude, respect, and connection. As he stepped through the shimmering doorway, leaving the glowing landscapes behind, he carried with him a sense of wonder and accomplishment. The ordinary life he had once known had transformed into an extraordinary story of courage, trust, and interplanetary friendship. Back in his living room on Earth, Armin looked around at the familiar objects, the books, the lamp, the small plant by the window. Everything seemed the same, yet he knew he had changed. He had seen worlds beyond imagination, faced challenges that tested every skill he possessed, and learned the true value of trust, cooperation, and kindness. The alien woman had come for a reason, and he had been ready to meet it. His life, once ordinary, was now filled with extraordinary memories and lessons that would stay with him forever. Even though she had returned to her world, the bond they had formed remained unbroken. Armin often thought of her, imagining the glowing rivers, floating cities, and her luminous eyes filled with curiosity and trust. He realized that life was full of unexpected journeys, and sometimes the most extraordinary adventures began in the most ordinary places. His quiet home, his simple routine, and his small acts of kindness had led to something incredible, a connection that spanned worlds and proved that courage, empathy, and trust could truly make a difference. And as he sat quietly, reflecting on the adventure, Armin knew one thing clearly. The portal that had opened in his house was not just a doorway to another world. It was a doorway to understanding, growth, and the limitless possibilities that awaited those willing to embrace the unknown.